Look, I know what that title looks like. It sounds like something ripped straight out of a trashy reality show, but I promise you, this is absolutely real, and it's the most difficult, gut-wrenching thing I've ever lived through. I need outside opinions because right now, I'm living in a silent, tense apartment with a man who has no idea his favorite thing in the world is gone, and I'm terrified of what comes next. My fiancé, let's call him Alex, and I have been together for 7 years. We met in college, we built a life together, we adopted a ridiculously fluffy cat named Charmin Mao, and we were supposed to get married in 3 months. The invitations were sent, the venue was booked, the deposit for the caterer was non-refundable. Everything was set. I thought we were the picture of stability. The couple everyone else looked at and said, they're going to make it. Alex is a musician. Not a famous one, but he plays gigs on weekends, teaches guitar lessons during the week, and he's passionate about it. His prized possession, the thing he treated better than he treated me sometimes, and I say that only half-jokingly, was a 1960s Gibson ES-335. It was the real deal, vintage, beautiful, and expensive. He bought it right before we moved in together, sinking almost his entire savings into it. He never let me touch it without supervision. It sat in a climate-controlled case in the spare room, a shrine to his musical ambition. The running joke between us was that if the apartment ever caught fire, he'd save the cat, me, and the Gibson, in that order. The unraveling started small, almost imperceptibly. Alex had always been glued to his phone, but over the last few months, it got worse. He was distant. He'd take his phone to the bathroom, which was a new habit. He'd get texts late at night, look at them, and then quickly delete the notification history. When I'd ask what he was doing, he'd always say he was texting his drummer about a new set list or replying to a student. Standard stuff, right? But the feeling, that cold, sickening pit in my stomach, kept growing. Then came the red flag that I couldn't ignore. About 2 weeks ago, we were having dinner and Alex's phone died. He went to charge it, but he couldn't find his charger. I offered mine. He hesitated for a fraction of a second, which was enough for me to notice, and then said, "Nah, it's okay. I'll find it later. Let's just enjoy the meal." It was weird. He always charges his phone immediately. Later that night, I went to grab a book off the shelf in the spare room, the guitar room. As I reached up, my hand brushed against something heavy tucked behind a stack of old sheet music. It was a phone. Not his regular phone, but a burner phone. It was cheap, black, and had a cracked screen protector. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I did the thing you're not supposed to do. I didn't hesitate. I just opened it. It wasn't locked. What I found was a constellation of dating apps. Hinge, Tinder, Bumble, even some niche ones I didn't recognize. But it wasn't just that he had the apps. The profiles were active, fresh, and meticulously crafted. He was using a different name, Mark, and claimed to be a freelance sound engineer, a slight distortion of the truth to keep his real life compartmentalized. There were hundreds of messages, flirty, explicit, planning dates that, judging by the timestamps, he had told me were late rehearsals or unexpected teaching opportunities. The most devastating part wasn't the explicit nature of the messages, it was the lies of omission. One conversation with a woman named Chloe stood out. She asked him about commitment, and his reply was chillingly casual. "I'm not looking for anything serious. Just got out of a long, boring thing. I need fun right now." A long, boring thing. That was me. That was our 7 years. That was the wedding we were spending $40,000 on. I put the phone back exactly where I found it. I walked out of that room and the world was spinning. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't scream. The silence was deafening. I sat on the couch, staring at the cat, who was blissfully unaware, and a single thought crystallized in my mind. He gave up his integrity for a few cheap thrills, and I'm going to make him feel the loss of something irreplaceable. I spent a sleepless night formulating a plan, and by 8 a.m. it was set. I knew the value of that guitar. I knew it was his greatest love. I also knew a guy named Jeremy, a collector I'd met at one of Alex's gigs, who had always drooled over the Gibson. I called Jeremy. I opened the conversation with a lie that tasted like ash. Alex is looking to sell the Gibson. Emergency funds needed. He wants it gone fast, quiet, and off the books. Cash only. Jeremy was interested. Immediately. Too interested. He knew what he was getting, and he knew a desperate seller when he heard one. He offered me $18,500, already lowballing, but I didn't care about maximizing the profit. I cared about maximizing the consequence. I needed the cash, and I needed the guitar gone before Alex noticed. I accepted the offer on the condition that he pick it up in 2 hours. The transaction itself was surreal. I hauled the heavy, custom case out to the parking lot of a grocery store half an hour away from our apartment. Jeremy arrived in a beat-up van, his eyes wide and hungry. He opened the case and stared at the dark cherry finish of the Gibson, running his hand over the neck like it was fine art. For a moment, even in my rage, I felt a flicker of guilt, a sense of violating something truly beautiful and valuable. But then I remembered Chloe and long, boring thing, and the guilt evaporated, replaced with cold, hard resolve. I handed Jeremy a thick envelope of cash. I counted it quickly. It was all there. $18,500. I watched him secure the case in the back of his van, and then he drove away, taking Alex's most treasured possession out of his life forever. I drove home feeling simultaneously numb and hyper-aware. The cash was heavy on the passenger seat. When I got back, I tucked the envelope deep into the back of a drawer in my office desk, underneath old tax documents. I looked at the now empty guitar stand in the spare room. It just looked like a blank spot on the carpet, an absence that only Alex would recognize. For the next few days, I lived in a state of carefully constructed normalcy. Alex was oblivious. He'd come home from his teaching gig, grab his acoustic for practice, and never even glanced at the corner where the Gibson used to sit in its case. He was distracted, constantly checking his regular phone and occasionally excusing himself to the spare room to check the burner, which I had also carefully retrieved and was now keeping hidden on my person. I started noting his movements, tracking his lies. He told me he had a last-minute solo gig downtown on Friday night. I knew this meant he was meeting Chloe or one of the burner contacts. That Friday, I decided to set the stage. I cooked his favorite meal, acted loving, and wished him luck for his gig. He kissed me, grabbed his cheap practice guitar, the acoustic, he wouldn't take the Gibson on a risky downtown trip, obviously, and left. As soon as the door closed, I pulled out the envelope of cash. I took exactly $4,000 and bundled it together, leaving the rest in the drawer. I went to the spare room, got a piece of paper, and wrote a short, sharp note, which I taped to the empty guitar stand. A long, boring thing. I left the bundled $4,000 on the note. I didn't want the money, not really. I wanted the message to hit him like a physical blow. The $4,000 represented the cost of the non-refundable deposit for the caterer, money that was now lost, just like his guitar, just like our future. The $4,000 was the first thing that was truly gone. Then I took my own bag, Chairman Mao, and the remaining $14,500, and I drove to my sister's apartment across town. I called the caterer's number and left a message canceling the booking, telling them to keep the deposit. I called the venue and did the same. The wedding was officially off. I was sitting on my sister's couch, petting Chairman Mao, and shaking uncontrollably when Alex got home around 1 a.m. I know the exact time because my phone started vibrating nonstop. He didn't call my regular number. He called the burner phone, the one he thought was safely hidden in his spare room. I let it ring once, then I answered. "Hello?" I whispered. Silence. Then a sharp intake of breath. It's something's catastrophically wrong. It's the long, boring thing. I thought you were at your gig. He started shouting at not at me, but into the space around him. Where are you? What did you do? The phone. My phone, I left it. He trailed off as the realization must have hit him. He was standing in the spare room. He was looking at the empty space. It was just a few burner profiles, right? Just fun? Not serious? I just wanted to remind you what serious loss feels like. The Gibson is gone. The caterer is canceled. The wedding is off. The silence on the other end was absolute. I could almost picture him standing there, staring at the empty stand and the single sheet of paper taped to it, the $4,000 cash on the floor. I waited. Then came the scream. It was raw, guttural, and inhuman. The sound of a man realizing he'd lost his most prized possession and in the process the stability of his entire life. He wasn't screaming about me. He was screaming for the guitar. I hung up. I muted my phone. I sat there in the quiet of my sister's apartment, watching the fat tears roll down my cheeks and onto Chairman Meow's fur. The revenge was complete. The relief was non-existent. The night I left, Alex called the burner phone 27 times. He tried my regular phone, my work phone, and even left a desperate, rambling voicemail on my sister's landline, which she immediately deleted without listening to the whole thing. He was panicking, but it wasn't the panic of a man who realized he'd hurt the person he loves. It was the sheer, terrifying panic of a man who had been caught and then stripped of his most valuable comfort object. My sister, Chloe, yes, the irony of that name was not lost on me, was furious. Not at me, but for me. She was protective and practical. "You did the right thing ethically," she said, wrapping her arm around me as I stared blankly at the wall. "But legally, Alex is going to realize he needs to report the Gibson stolen, or he needs to come after you for the money." That was the practical reality I hadn't yet faced. I had committed a form of theft, a brazen act of financial revenge. The $18,500 was sitting in a shoebox, and I hadn't touched it. It was tainted. The next day, Alex showed up at Chloe's apartment. He stood outside the security door, ringing the buzzer relentlessly. Chloe went out to the lobby to deal with him while I hid in the back room with Chairman Meow, my heart hammering against my ribs. I could hear the muffled, strained sounds of their argument. Alex wasn't pleading for forgiveness, he was demanding the guitar back. "Where is it?" he yelled. "It's a vintage instrument. It's worth more than your sister's car. You have to tell me who she sold it to." Chloe was stone cold. "She didn't sell it, Alex. You lost it. You traded 7 years, a marriage, and your dignity for a cheap phone and a string of burner accounts. Consider the Gibson the cost of doing business in a dishonest relationship." He must have completely lost it then, because I heard the thud of something hitting the wall. Chloe came back moments later, her face white. "He's gone. I called security. He said he'd call the police. He said he would sue you for everything you have." I knew he wouldn't call the police. How could he? "Yes, officer, I need to report a $20,000 guitar stolen. My fiancé sold it after she found my hidden burner phone full of dating apps where I told women I was single." The story would expose his cheating, ruin his reputation in the small local music scene, and potentially get his teaching license reviewed. No, he was cornered and I knew it. He'd never admit to the full, messy truth in public. Instead, he went silent. For 3 days, there was nothing. Then an email arrived. It wasn't accusatory or angry, it was manipulative and mournful. Subject: the Gibson. "I know I messed up. I was scared of getting married, scared of settling down, and I handled it the worst way possible. I betrayed your trust, and I'm genuinely sorry for the pain I caused. I love you, and I want to fix this. But please, please don't destroy my career because of my mistake. That guitar, it's not just money, it's my livelihood. It's my identity. I can't book serious gigs without it. I need it to teach. I will do anything, anything at all to get it back. I won't ask about the phone again. I won't ask about the wedding money. Just please give me the guitar back.
We can talk about everything else later. Just tell me where it is." I read the email, and the numbness finally cracked. I didn't feel triumph. I felt an overwhelming sense of profound, lonely exhaustion. He was right about one thing. The guitar was his identity, and by taking it, I had taken a sledgehammer to the core of his self-worth. I wrote him back a single sentence, then blocked his email address. "You taught me the value of something you can't replace. Keep the change." I decided to keep the money from the sale and the remaining $14,500. I used $5,000 of it to pay off the final chunk of my student loan. The rest I put in a high-yield savings account, labeled simply Freedom Fund. I realized the money wasn't a reward for revenge. It was the severance pay for 7 years of my life. It was the cost of my tuition in the University of Hard Knocks. Looking back now, 6 months later, I've moved into my own small apartment. No Alex, no Gibson, and certainly no burner phones. Chairman Meow is happier than ever, getting all the attention. The wedding rings were returned, and the whole fiasco eventually became a small, localized scandal that Alex had to manage, silently confirming the rumors by his sheer refusal to discuss the guitar's disappearance. Do I regret selling the Gibson? In the quiet, rational light of day, yes, I know it was an extreme, legally dubious, and perhaps even cruel act of revenge. I allowed my devastation to dictate a nuclear option, and I didn't take the high road. I sacrificed my own moral comfort for the sake of immediate, equalizing pain. But here's the truth that lives in my bones. Alex never would have learned the lesson otherwise. He was operating with the fundamental belief that he could compartmentalize his life, keep the boring but stable fiancé on one side and the thrill of the chase on the other. He believed the life we built was a safety net, an entitlement he could always return to, and that his Gibson was untouchable, a symbol of his identity that existed outside the messy rules of our relationship. My action shattered both of those illusions simultaneously. By selling his most prized possession for a fraction of its emotional value, I forced him to confront the fact that his deception had a catastrophic, tangible, and immediate price. He lost the security of his home and the foundation of his career in one night. The loss was the only language he understood. I took something that wasn't legally mine to sell, but from an emotional standpoint, I think I was simply acting as a survivor, protecting myself from an emotional debt I didn't owe. I chose to close the chapter with a defining act, rather than drag out a painful, slow death of a dishonest relationship. I'm not proud of the method, but I'm free. And for the first time in a long time, the cold, sickening pit in my stomach is gone. I'm left with the money, the cat, and the hard-won knowledge that sometimes the only way to get a liar's attention is to make them grieve something they truly, fundamentally care about.